We all want a happy life. Let's find out how. I think it's probably the most overarching desire of all mankind. And for us, thank God, in the modern world where we live, 21st century, for most of us, our basic needs of life are, thank God, in place. Most of us have the food we need and some type of housing, and thank God. So since we're not scrambling for survival, probably the strongest thing we all want is to be happy. And we all want to be happy. And the question is how to achieve that goal, especially when life being life doesn't always feel so good. Life doesn't always make us so happy. Now, sometimes, of course, it does. And sometimes we have good things and great things, and we were concerned about something and it all worked out, or we got this unexpected compliment or bonus or promotion, or friends visited, or joy from children or grandchildren. Of course, there's so much good in our life. But sometimes other things are there as well that can obscure or just really make us tense or stressed or nervous or upset or unhappy or just feel very uncomfortable with our life. So there's a lot of different techniques. And of course, we've spoken about this before, but it's been a while. And I felt that it's something we always want to refresh and remember and refocus on and try to gain deeper tools. And very often we come back to similar concepts from a deeper angle or from ways we've discussed but didn't yet internalize, and try to really work on them. And in a sense, it's a lifetime work. I mean, I've been working on it for a long time. Have I arrived? No. But hopefully, step by step, I'm getting closer and closer. And then it can slide back. But it's a little deeper. It's a little more internalized. It's a little closer. And that's, of course, the goal of our lifelong work of really, really internalizing joy. Foundationally, for joy, we need to look at the world and see it's good. If we look at our world and we know we have a good life, we're generally happy. We're generally content. We feel good. I have a good life. I feel good. Basically how we work. And therefore, a very basic perspective we have to remember is putting things in perspective and not getting thrown by the little details. I can get thrown by the little details. The general picture is excellent, but this happened now and it got me all tense or stressed or upset or worried or nervous or confused. Wait, my life is wonderful. Thank God. The big picture is great. This is a detail. And I have to shrink it to its proper, or maybe even smaller than its proper place, by really focusing on, as I feel inside myself, attention or nervousness or a worry or a fear, anxiety. We all have different colors and flavors of these emotions based on our psyche, based on our spiritual psyche is our emotional psyche. So we all have different ways we act out these emotions. Is it stress? Is it fear? Is it anger? Is it frustration? But whatever it is, I want to shrink that thing that threw me by remembering the general picture of my life. The general picture of my life is good. And sometimes I need to walk the road of experiencing those things and trusting God in those things. And that's, so to speak, what's earning me an even greater good. So a very basic tool, seen this in the writings of the Lubavitcher Rebbe, a basic tool, a simple tool, a tool that can work for us. Sometimes you can be in a space where nothing's going to work for you, but our goal is to make things work for us. Our goal is to get out of our rabbit hole. So sometimes what really helps is just putting it on paper, writing it down. Write down whatever is making you crazy, and on the other side of the column, write all the good, all the good, all the good. Keep writing, keep writing, keep writing all the good. Don't stop. Write more details, more additional facts, more aspect to really overwhelm yourself. You are deliberately trying to overwhelm yourself with an awareness of how good your life is. You want to feel so saturated with good, the other side of the column. And you see that thing that was making you nervous, making you worried, making you concerned, and you're like, okay, it's still there. Everything on the other side doesn't take it away, but it shrinks. Because I realize it's a piece. But I look at everything else going on, and I'm like, wow, there's all this good going on, and this is the piece I have to currently contend with. Okay, but it's only a piece. For this piece, I don't want my whole life feel like black. Because my whole life actually is I'm actually very grateful for so much in my whole life, and there's this piece I have to contend with. I'm not on vacation yet, and I probably never will be. There'll always be something I'm growing with. Something could be a lot of work, but not negative. Something could be a lot of positive, if we want to use the word stress and responsibility and demands, but could also be all very positive. If you have a new grandchild, you could be working very hard, you got a lot of responsibilities, you got a lot of things on your plate, but it's all positive. God's going to make sure we always work, but we should work in positive. So this simple idea of literally putting it on a piece of paper and writing, I personally find writing helps a lot. Sort of is a way of talking to ourselves. We talk to gain clarity. So instead of just talking out loud, we can talk through writing. All the good, all the good, all the good, and that piece that I need to deal with. And keep looking till that piece gets really tiny when my other list is really long. Have any of you ever done this? Like literally put it on paper. Raise your hand if you have done this with a piece of paper and a pen or pencil. Raise your virtual hand or your real hand. Because I'm here the only one that's saying they've done it with a paper. Oh no, Menucha said yes. No, Menucha's done it also. Sorry, Chav, you got to share your star. All right, she's generous. So Menucha's done it. Chav has done it. Now, who hasn't done it with a paper, but done it in their mind? Which is not as strong, which is not as effective. We want to be like Chav and Menucha. We want to do it with paper and pen because that makes it so concrete. Oh my gosh, I can just think this. Why do I need to write it? What am I going to do with a piece of paper afterwards? Nothing. Or save it. Take a picture or toss. That depends on you and your style. Like you might want to keep that paper because you might want to reread it later. Or you can say, oh, I can write it again. But making it when it's written, it's an action, it's concrete, it makes very. But for the rest of us who haven't put it on pen and paper, who's done it in their thoughts when they're stressed over something, when something's throwing them and making them feel not good about their life, that they've said, stop, breathe, and let me remember all the good. And then I'm going to look at that thing that's bothering me, but I'm going to see all the good. And I'm going to see that thing that's bothering me. And I'm going to keep doing this until that thing just got really small because there's a nice long. Who has done that? Rivka. Who else? And Chava. And Bella. All right. So there's a number that got us stuff in place. Bella.
Sometimes, yeah, I do too.
Good. I'm glad because it's very, very helpful. And I want in the future Ellen to say yes, and Rena to say yes, and Miriam to say yes, and Miriam to say yes, because as of course you know, because I very often push doing this, because honestly, for me, it could be such a lifeline. It could be such a lifeline. I don't know why. Maybe I just get thrown very easy, but something could happen and I could be like, whoa. And then I just stop and breathe and either write, type, think, or read things I've done in the past. But I find of all of the ways, writing is the strongest. Literally the physical act of writing makes a very strong, concrete effect in the world. We're told when we write literally in a spiritual level, it's making a concrete effect in the world. It's considered an action. And I like to write down all the things. And sometimes what I like to do, which I really find helps me a lot, is I write down within every area of challenge. I write down the good, meaning maybe, my daughter is, this is not a stress of mine at the moment. Thank God. Maybe it was a few months ago, so I can feel comfortable sharing it. It's not a big deal now to me, but my daughter is hiking the entire Israel. She's been doing it for a few months. There's a light at the end of the tunnel. I think in about 3 weeks she'll be done. So that could, as a mother, there could be that sense of like concern. I hope she's safe. And within that, I could say, thank you, God, because 2 weeks ago she joined up with 2 other girls and now she's not hiking alone. Oh, thank you, God, for the light within that concern. And so too, that was just a little example. But so too with all of the things, specifically challenge yourself within the area of stress, within the area of a difficult boss, of a health concern, of a relationship issue, of a financial issue. Within that issue, look and find good, because that is such a reassuring way of saying, okay, God, you're here. You're part of this picture. Even in my challenges, I have things to thank you for. It's okay. It's okay. So I know for me, this really helps, which is why, of course, I push this many, many, many times, because I want you to be helped the same way I'm helped. And I know I get thrown, and then I know this grounds me and centers me and anchors me. And sometimes I could be dealing with a real something. I'm not saying these things are fake, are trivia, but when we focus on all the other good in our blessed life, and I love remembering reminding myself that I have a very blessed life. So that's a good tip also. Always remember you have a very blessed life. So even if I'm dealing with a real something, but when I remember all the good in my very blessed life, it puts it in perspective. So I'm saying this really helps me. And we had at least 4 people that one way or another have done this, 4 or 5 actually. Just raise your hands if it helps you as well. For the ones that have done this, either written or thought, when you've gone through your blessings, when you put them down and looked at the thing that's bothering you and looked at your blessings and maybe added to the list, keep adding more things to that list of blessings, do you come to the point where it helps, where you could put things in perspective, where it's less fear-evoking, stress-evoking because of the totality of your life? Rivka said yes. Anyone else? And Menucha said yes. And Chava said yes. Whoa, we're going for a roll here. Anyone else that you've done it and it helps? It centers you. It reminds you what your life is really all about. Because hopefully when you think about it, you say, yeah, my life is good. Of course, when we're looking at the good in our life, we also want to look at the blessings in our life, the miracles in our life, the kindness in our life. I know some people think like miracles. Miracles happen like in ancient Egypt. We all have miracles. We all have good. We all have Hashem kindnesses, God's kindnesses. A person should never think, well, maybe you have miracles and you see God's kindness and you see God's blessing. We all are God's only child. We all have kindnesses, miracles, and blessings in our life. And when we focus on them, we feel grateful. And when you feel grateful, it's hard to feel stressed and tense and anxious at the same time. But that thing exists. It does exist. But you can't really feel tense and stressed and anxious over it when you're actually feeling very grateful for all the blessings. So why don't we take a little bit of time and just take a second now to think and remind yourself, just think for a few seconds of the blessings in your life. Everyone can focus. You can close your eyes. You can close your camera if it makes it easier to focus. But then afterwards, turn it back on and just think of the blessings in your life. Okay, do me a favor. I asked you to come up with blessings. Now what I'd like you to do is count the blessings you just came up with, because I didn't ask you to count them. So you might have been thinking and not counting. But now just go through your head and count all the things you just thought about. You just remembered. If you closed your screen to contemplate better, please open it, because as I said, this class gets full marks for being the most nice, happy faces at any class I teach. So you counted. Who here came up with at least 5 things? If you came up with at least 5 things, give yourself a thumbs up. You were thinking of your blessings, or at least 5 blessings you came up with. Wow. Look at that. Look at that. Look how many of you came up with at least 5 things. And I didn't give you too many seconds. I really didn't, because I didn't want anyone to get antsy and wonder what was going on. But even in the short time I gave you, so many of you came up with 5 things so quickly. That's good. It means your mind is good at processing the blessings in your life. And that's a really good thing. It means you think about it. If you didn't think that road too often, it would be hard to come up with the blessings. It's like a muscle that's out of shape. It's like a limb you don't usually use. You know, if you start doing a certain exercise move you haven't done for 30 years, you feel it the next day for a long time. So when your mind is used to remembering your blessings, you naturally think of your blessings very easily, and they flood your mind. And that's good. And that's how we all should be, because the more we think of them, the more we see them, and the more we feel them, and the more we know we have a very blessed life. And when I know I have a very blessed life, that thing is there. But hey, I have a very blessed life. I can handle it. It's not going to throw me. It's not going to change my perspective on my life. Now, of course, sometimes we're going through something that seems, as we'd say, serious. Because obviously some things you could say, okay, stress at work, thank God it's not in the family, this, all right, it's going to pass, this. You know, there's a lot of ways we can give ourselves good, healthy lines to minimize what's bothering us. And that's a very good thing to do. But sometimes we can't minimize it. Sometimes it's big. Sometimes it takes up a lot of space because it's a big thing that God just threw at us. But we're still supposed to process that. And we're still supposed to have joy in our life, even as we're dealing with something big. And sometimes we have to understand, why would God be doing this? Now, of course, whenever we start walking down that road, who are we to understand God? That's true. Don't worry, we won't. But we can a little bit try to understand as much as helps us process what's going on in our life. So when someone is going through something big, again, you could think, why would God be doing that? Why would God be challenging me in this way? If he wants me to be happy, if he wants me to be joyous, if I'm his child, why would he be doing something? There are many answers to that very hard question. One way of thinking of it is to understand that our physical world is one layer of our reality. There are many other layers as well. We have many, many layers in our world. And sometimes we are truly going through something tough to refine us, to help us attain something on another layer. Maybe to remove a problem, a spiritual problem, a blemish, something that happened early in our life and we never worked through, to give us the afterlife, to remove a blockage from reward. It actually says in the verse, King Solomon said, the one who God loves, he rebukes. That's sort of a weird thing. You think rebuke you should say for the people that aren't so loving to God. The one who God loves must mean the ones who love God. And the one who loves God, those are the ones you shower with blessings, God. Those are the ones you're so kind to, God. What do you mean those are the ones you rebuke? God, in his kindness, in his infinite love for us, sometimes will give a person a cleansing process in this world instead of in the afterlife. Because we're told that in the afterlife, it's a lot harder to get clean. Afterlife means, let me give a little background because maybe everyone's not sure what I'm talking about by those terms. We live in this world. We're here to serve. We're here to accomplish. We're here to change the world. We're here to give God a home. We're here to do good. We're here to keep away from bad. We're here to rectify previous lifetimes. We're here to help other people. We have many, many, many reasons why we're in this. And then the natural way of the world until the redemption, a person passes away. And when a person passes away, their soul is judged. What did they do in this world? What did they accomplish? And again, you might have had a myriad of reasons why you're in this world. You were in this world to help someone. A person could be in this world for 70 years to do one significant favor for one other person. You were in this world to refine yourself. You were in this world to accomplish the commandments and learn those portions of Torah that in all your previous lifetime you never did. You were in this world because God needed your help for a certain situation. You were in this world to overcome certain challenges and still believe in God. You had lots of reasons for being in this world. The soul is evaluated. The whole life is reviewed. What was accomplished? What needed to be accomplished? What was achieved? And are there any barriers remaining? Was there anything that happened in this lifetime or in a previous lifetime and wasn't rectified by this lifetime that's a barrier between the soul and eternal good? And if there are those barriers, then that soul has to go through a cleansing process. There's some very light cleansing processes for light barriers, and then there's stronger ones. And of course, the common one, we use the term Gehenna for a real intense cleansing of the soul. Though we don't believe it takes that long. We believe for any regular person, no way would they go through that cleansing for a year. Like for sure. Whatever cleansing needed to be done would have been accomplished. And of course, we know that people in this world that love this person and that want to help this person, as they do merits, they give charity for that person's sake, they study Torah for that person's sake, they do mitzvahs to the commandments for that person's sake. All of that helps. All of that makes the cleansing process easier. But still, it's a slow cleansing process. Because after this life, the next world is a world of judgment. And in judgment, cleansing is slow. Our world is a world of compassion. Believe it or not, this is God's world of compassion. And in a world of compassion, compassionately, cleansing goes very quickly. And the metaphor for that, and it's not mine, it's the Alter Rebbe's, who we've spoken about in this class, of course. The Alter Rebbe compares it to the movement of the sun versus the movement of the shadows in this world. Shadows in this world can move a few inches, which is actually reflecting millions of miles of motion 90 million miles away on planet Sun. So the Alter Rebbe says, this world is like the movement of the shadows. Few inches and we accomplished. The next world is like the movement of planet Sun itself, where you have to move so many miles for any real progress. So that's why sometimes in our world, a person literally goes through pain to help them, to cleanse them, and to remove from them the need for anything in the future. And that sort of reminds me of a famous vignette with the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe. One of the many times when he was under arrest and interrogation, at one point, the people interrogating him got sort of annoyed, exasperated, and a gun was pulled out and put to his head. And he was told, do you see this little toy? This little toy has made a lot of people talk. And the Rebbe responded, that toy can only frighten people that have one world and many gods. I have one God and two worlds. I'm not afraid of your toy. Meaning, if someone thinks this is the only world there is, this is it. You're putting a gun to my head, I'm going to lose this. This is all I have. I'll talk. What else do you want me to do for you? I have two worlds. I know this is only one of my worlds. I've got another world, an eternal world, a better world. And I have one God. I'm not giving him up because of your toy. Now, that, of course, is a Rebbe, a leader of the Jewish people. I mean, we understand he's bigger than a gun. I actually heard today, I was by the Levaya, the ceremony in honor of the passing of a woman in my community that I know, an older woman. And it was very interesting because there was a similar story, and this was not a Rebbe, a regular human being. I'll tell you what happened, just so you should understand, this is accessible. And I heard it today. And this should be an elevation for her soul, for this woman who passed away just this past Friday. She actually, give you a little background to understand the background of the story. Her father, this was before the Holocaust, or when the Nazis were first getting strong in Germany and then being very aggressive in Poland and taking over. They lived in Hungary, and her father was like, this madman's going to take over all of Europe. And he's out to destroy the Jewish people. So we got to get out of here. Now, when her father said this, everyone thought he was crazy. They're living a totally comfortable life in modern Hungary, where there's no persecution on the Jews. It's not like Poland. It's not like Germany, where yes, you have this madman Hitler ranting and raving. But I mean, Hungary. What's ever going to happen in Hungary? And he said, we got to get out of here. We're leaving. I'm leaving. And his wife didn't know what to do. And her family said, divorce him. He's a madman. He's a nut. Your husband's crazy. He's terrified of his own shadow. So there's somebody ranting in Germany, please. And she went to her rabbi, and her rabbi said, go with your husband. So she did. This man and his wife and their children left Hungary and went to France. And then he realized France wasn't safe either. It's a very interesting life story, and I know her story, but I'm not going to take more time than that to tell it, just to give you the context. He said, we got to get out of Europe. He said, no place in Europe is safe. And at that time, the only place where really the Jews could go, if they could buy the visas, was various places in South America. And her mother was a very brave woman, and fair and blonde, and looked very Aryan. Her mother was in France, and her mother would take trips back to Germany to retrieve the treasures that a number of German Jews had fled and left behind. And for doing so, she would go to Germany, get their secret treasures where they told her they were, bring them back. She looked like this beautiful Aryan woman. Nobody ever stopped her. And each time they gave her a certain percentage. And trip after trip, they raised the money. And when they had enough money, they bought visas to Santo Domingo, island in South America. So this family, of which the woman I know who just passed away Friday was a little girl, they went to Santo Domingo. And of course, unfortunately, we know the history. So we know what happened, unfortunately, to this woman's large extended family in Hungary, when that madman, of course, did exactly what her father thought he was going to do. So they are in this island, Santo Domingo. And he was like a rabbi. He was a religious Jew. There's various Jews in the island, Jews like them that had run away, fearing Hitler, Jews who had been there before. And her father knew how to circumcise, and he would go to various places in the island if there was a Jew that had a baby to give a circumcision. And once he was called to the very northern end of the island, there was a Jewish woman there, had a baby. He goes, he circumcises the baby. And there was another Jew there, a German Jew. And he said, come to my house. I want to speak to you. He said, sure. So her father and her, she was a little girl, they go to this man's house. And the man says, my mother always said to me, I have to have a Jewish wedding. That's very important. She's not going to rest unless I have a Jewish wedding. So here's my wife. And he points to some local non-Jewish Santo Domingan woman. And I want you're a rabbi. I want you to marry us under a chuppah. Because this is what my mother, blessed memory, wants. And her father looked and said, I can't do that. I can't marry you to a non-Jewish woman and put you under a chuppah, and that's what your mom wanted. I can't do that. And the man pulled out a rifle, and he held it to this little girl's head. The little girl being the woman I knew, Judy. He put it on Judy's head, and he said, if you don't make a chuppah for us, I'm pulling the trigger. And he really meant it. And her father, who was not the leader of the generation, not a holy, godly tzaddik, just a very good Jew, he said, you know what? Let's talk about your mother. Where's something to drink? Let's drink in your mom's memory. So the man, he still had his hand on the revolver, on the rifle. It was a rifle. He said, yeah, we could drink to my mother. I'm doing this for my mother, my deceased mother, my blessed mom. He pulled out some rum. That's what they drank in Santo Domingo. Each one had a glass of rum. The German Jew drank a glass. Her father managed to spill his on the floor. Let's have another glass. Yeah, I'll drink to my mother again. They poured another glass. He drank his. Her father spilled his on the floor. And they kept drinking until the man fell asleep. And then they left his house. And when her father would retell the story, her siblings said, like, what were you thinking? What were you thinking? This crazy man is putting this huge rifle to this little girl's head. What were you thinking? Like, I don't know. But I knew I couldn't do that marriage. So I don't know. I just trusted God and kept going. And I shared that story. It should be an elevation for her soul, a very special woman that just passed away this Friday. And I shared it because I thought it's special for us to understand. Because sometimes we hear stories, but they're such great people that it's like, yeah, it's cool that the Jewish people have a lot of great people, but we're regular people. So I just shared a story of a regular person, a regular good Jew who says, I'm not going to let a gun at my daughter's head get between me and God. And I'm not going to let that gun scare me. That gun doesn't scare me. Just like the previous Rebbe said, he knew he had two worlds and one God, and he wasn't scared by that gun either. So when we're aware of the absolute truth, that we all have two worlds and one God, and when we know both of those worlds are real for us, this physical world is real. We are human beings. Physical world is real, but the spiritual world is real also. It's a real world. The spirit is a real world. So we're not scared. Now, again, you could say, well, I guess if a gun was pointed to my head, I could tell myself not to be scared by death. But what does that have to do with my reality of being scared by the various stresses I'm going through? But it's the same point. Who knows? Who knows the reason behind this? What seems like a tragedy could be the greatest help for a person. We're not going to say things to minimize someone else's suffering. I was just referencing the Holocaust and that story with that woman. Obviously, we're not going to say, yeah, it was great, it was wonderful, it was horrible. We don't explain tragedies. It's wrong to explain a tragedy. Actually, for those of you that have heard of Jonathan Sacks, he was a very special person, the chief rabbi of England, actually had a very, very strong relationship with the Lubavitcher Rebbe, and Lubavitcher was actually the one who put him on his roll to the rabbinate because he was planning on making money and being a lawyer. And the Rebbe was one that steered him to be a rabbi instead and be a leader of the Jewish people instead. So Jonathan Sacks said something very interesting. He said, we can't explain why bad things happen to good people. God set it up that way. God set it up that we can't explain why bad things happen to good people. Because if we could explain, if we understood, and it made sense to us why these bad things are happening, then how could we complain to God? If we look and we say, oh yeah, that seems really bad, but it makes sense and I totally see how it makes sense, I can't complain. I get it. It makes sense. So God set it up that we don't understand. That when we see things, they are inexplicable. They make no sense to us. And it's good they make no sense to us, because then we can honestly complain, and we do complain. Sort of interesting, like there's stories of times when people knew they were being judged. There's many, many stories of people being judged in the heavenly courts and knowing about it, and many, many elaborate stories. But there's a certain common theme in all the stories, which is we don't want to be judged by angels. We don't even want to be judged by righteous, holy tzaddikim, holy, godly Jews who passed away. We want to be judged by people that are still living in planet Earth, because they understand how not clear it is. They understand how obscure it is. They understand how in this world things really don't make sense. And again, that's deliberate design by God that it doesn't make sense. So then we can truly turn to God and truly complain like his beloved child. We can get answered. But even as it doesn't make sense, and even as we're honestly complaining, not for our own life, but for other people's lives. For our own life, we're not supposed to complain. For our own life, we're supposed to accept. We're supposed to reflect. We're supposed to move. But for other people's lives, we can complain. When we see other people going through hard times, we can say, this is such a good person, God. What are you doing? Why are you allowing this good person to suffer? What is going on with your world? That's wonderful to say when somebody else is suffering. When you're suffering, you're supposed to reflect on, why would this be happening? And how can I change because of this? But when someone else is suffering, it doesn't make sense to you. Good. So you can really complain to God. That is actually the idea. But at the same time as we're complaining, at the same time as we're telling God, this makes no sense, I don't know why you're doing this, please stop, because this is an innocent person who is needlessly suffering. At the same time as we say all that, we have to recognize that from a blade of grass to the Holocaust, it's all deliberate design, deliberate God providence, specific to every nuance of the action. God has his reasons. We don't understand. His wisdom is infinite, and we cannot understand infinity. But not understanding reasons doesn't remove the reality that there are reasons. And that's a very, 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 very important point to think about. Because if we're going through something and it doesn't seem that there's any reason, and it's just pain, it's just suffering. It's just like, why is this happening? And why it seems so almost like pointless. Suffering is much more intense. But when you can wrap your mind around it and say, this is part of God's infinite, inexplicable wisdom, and this is part of God's love for me. When you think of it that way, it actually lessens the pain. It actually lessens the pain. I want to try to say that one more time, because I think it's such an important point, because for so many of us, that's something that can be so hard. If we think of things we're going through and they just seem pointless and painful and hard, and we have no clue why this is happening, but it's just really, really hurts, it's really hard to process. It's really hard to go through something like that. But if I shift my brain and say, this is from God. I don't know why this is happening, but I know there's a reason. I don't know why this is happening, but I know God absolutely loves, and he's doing this deliberately, and he knows why he's doing this. I still don't know. I'm not privy to the secret. If I hold those thoughts very strongly, this is God, this is love, doesn't feel like love, but it's love. Doesn't make sense to me, but there's a reason. Seems random, but God's never random. As I say to myself those thoughts again and again and again, it lessens the pain. The situation is still there. I have to deal with the situation. But a lot of the pain comes from my emotional response to the situation. And it really lessens the pain when I really, really, really hold that very tight. And I know for myself, I've definitely gone through that for various things in my life. And I really, really see it work. I really see that the more I remind myself of what I know is true. I know all this is true, but sometimes we just get thrown by life. I just remind myself, this is from God. He's only good. He only loves me. This is love. He knows what he's doing. He's doing it for a reason. It's a good reason. And I say it over again. And then I say it over again. I have to sometimes say it many times for many days, but I keep saying it again and again and again. Every time my mind goes back in that direction, I say it again. This is God. It's only God. There's nothing but God. And he absolutely loves me. And this is for a reason. And it's for a good reason. And it's a reason because of his love for me. And like at a certain point, it works. And I'm okay. I still have to deal with the situation, but emotionally, I'm okay. And when we're emotionally okay, the situation is just something we have to deal with. You know, if a person would go outside and say, oh, you know, I don't see anything on the moon. It doesn't look to me like there's anything on the moon. Or I don't think there's any planet past the moon. I know people make up these myths about Saturn or Jupiter or Mars. It's all a bunch of stories. I never saw any of them in my life. I don't think I got anyone else that ever saw them. So obviously they don't exist. Other persons, just because you don't see planet millions of miles away, we can't see that far. But those planets, if they're millions of miles away, if they're light years away, they exist. And we know they exist. And none of us have ever seen them. Now we're talking about something very physical, a physical planet, actually a finite number of light years away. It's a finite distance. The sun is 90 million miles away. That's a finite distance. 90 million miles is a finite distance. So if I don't see the planets, don't see anything on the moon, it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. I just can't see that far. And we know that. But it's a good metaphor to think about our distance from God and his wisdom. Because these physical planets, we know they exist. We don't think the pictures are fake outs. We know there's those planets. We know they're there and we've never seen them. But how could I see them? They're so far from me. But that doesn't take away the reality. About that, and I think about God, who's infinite, and his wisdom, which is infinite, and say, just like I accept things that exist, though I've never seen them and nobody has ever seen them, but that's okay. They're too far for me to see. I can accept that God's infinity and his wisdom's infinity is also quite far from me. It makes perfect sense that my mind doesn't get it. And yet it's absolutely, absolutely true, which means I can be in a state of joy. Everything comes from God. God is good. All that happens is in essence good. Sometimes open and revealed. That's what we're looking for. Sometimes disguised. Can't see it immediately, but it's still in essence good. So what I'd like to continue discussing, why is God doing this? Why does he take such good for his child who he loves so much? Me, you, every single one of us is God's beloved, only child that he's been waiting for a long time. So why would he take the good for us who he loves so much and hide it in such uncomfortable wrapping paper? That's the to be continued, and we will discuss that next week. Thank you so much for joining. Hope that we can all make this practical and find ways to try it. And we should feel our lives are so blessed. Our lives are so good. And as sometimes we're thrown a few curveballs, we should continue to feel our lives are so blessed. Our lives are